She responds warmly every time you reach out. The conversation flows. She seems genuinely engaged, and yet she never initiates, not once. And the longer this pattern continues, the more the question becomes impossible to ignore. Does she actually care, or is she simply being polite to someone she has already categorized as not worth the effort of reaching out to first? Here is the answer that the research on female communication behavior gives, and it is not the one most men expect. The pattern of never initiating is almost never about caring less. It is almost always about something entirely different. And the specific thing you do in response to it determines whether that pattern ever changes. Before naming what to do, the research behind why this pattern exists needs to be established clearly. Because without understanding the mechanism, any response to it is guesswork. Research from evolutionary psychologist David Buss, whose cross-cultural studies on courtship behavior remain among the most replicated in the field, found a consistent asymmetry in how men and women manage the expression of early romantic interest. Men, on average, communicate interest more directly and with less concern for the risk of that interest being asymmetric. Women, on average, engage in what Buss described as investment calibration, a behavioral pattern where the expression of interest is deliberately moderated to match or slightly lag behind the expressed investment of the other person. This calibration is not strategic in the conscious sense. It is the behavioral output of an attachment system that has been calibrated through experience to protect against the specific pain of asymmetric investment, of caring more than the other person, of reaching out more than the other person, of being the one who wanted it more. And the simplest available protection against that specific pain is not initiating until the evidence strongly suggests that initiation will be met with at least equal investment. This is the explanation for the pattern. She is not failing to initiate because she cares less. She is failing to initiate because the evidence has not yet accumulated to the point where initiation feels like a low-risk move. And the thing you do that changes this pattern is the thing that changes that evidence calculation. 3 specific things, all grounded in research. And the third one is the one that most directly addresses the core mechanism and produces the shift that the first 2 alone cannot fully achieve. The first thing is this: remove the pressure from your contact. This is the adjustment that has to happen first, and it is the one that requires the most honest self-assessment because it requires looking at what your contact is actually communicating rather than what you intend it to communicate. When the pattern of non-initiation has been present for a while, contact from the man who always initiates begins to carry a specific quality. It begins to feel, from the receiving end, like a test that needs to be passed. A communication that carries the implicit expectation of a specific kind of response. The warmth of the literal content, the "hey, how are you?" or the "I was thinking about you," is present. But underneath it, the specific anxiety of someone who is counting the interactions, noting the asymmetry, and needing each exchange to perform well enough to justify the ongoing investment is also present. And that anxiety is felt. This was the specific finding of research published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology on what researchers called anxious attachment communication. The study found that people on the receiving end of contact driven by relationship anxiety reported feeling it as pressure even when the literal content of the contact was warm and positive. The words were pleasant. The felt quality of receiving them was not. The practical shift is this: contact needs to come from a place of genuine surplus rather than emotional deficit, from abundance rather than need. The message that is sent because something genuinely, specifically made him think of her, not because the silence had become uncomfortable, lands completely differently than the message sent because the silence needed to be broken. She cannot always articulate this difference, but she feels it with complete accuracy. The second thing is this: give her something worth initiating about. This is the thing most men never consider. And it is more practical and more immediately actionable than anything else in this video. One of the most consistent reasons women do not initiate is that they do not have a specific, comfortable reason to reach out. This sounds almost too simple, but the research on what Deborah Tannen calls rapport talk versus report talk, the distinction between communication for connection versus communication for information exchange, reveals something important here. Women are significantly more likely to initiate contact when there is a genuine, specific, comfortable conversational hook, something that provides an organic reason to reach out that doesn't require the vulnerability of reaching out without a pretext. Not because they are calculating, but because the initiation that has a natural starting point feels significantly less exposed than the initiation that says, I was thinking about you with nothing attached. This means that one of the most effective things available is creating those starting points, not manufacturing them artificially, but genuinely. Sharing something in a conversation that is naturally continuable, something that will probably produce a follow-up thought in her mind later. Mentioning something ongoing that has a natural next chapter. Leaving a thread that, when she thinks of it later, gives her an easy, comfortable, low vulnerability way to reach back. The key detail: the thread has to be genuine. Something actually interesting, actually ongoing, actually producing real thoughts in both directions. Because a manufactured thread, something deployed as a technique for creating initiation opportunities, produces the same pressure-driven quality in the contact that the first adjustment is designed to remove. The third thing is this: let her notice your absence. This is the counterintuitive one. And it is the one that most directly addresses the core mechanism of the pattern. The investment calibration that David Buss's research describes, the behavioral pattern where a woman's expression of interest lags behind the other person's, only recalibrates when there is genuine new information about the other person's investment level. And the most powerful piece of new information available is the experience of his absence after consistent presence. Robert Cialdini's research on scarcity and perceived value found something that applies directly here. The perceived value of anything, including a person's presence and attention, increases significantly when that presence and attention is no longer consistently available. Not because anything changed about the person, because availability that is not infinite communicates something about value that infinite availability cannot. When his contact has been consistent, constant, and reliably present, when she can predict with certainty that he will reach out and has been able to predict this for some time, his contact has, through its very consistency, stopped registering as a signal. It has become background, expected, unremarkable, a genuine reduction in contact, not as a game, not as punishment, not performed for effect, but as the natural expression of a man who has his own full, occupied life and does not organize his behavior primarily around her responsiveness, produces something that consistent contact cannot produce. It produces her noticing. And the specific thing she notices is the absence of something that had, without her fully realizing it, become something she relied on. Attachment researcher John Bowlby's foundational work on proximity and the activation of the attachment system found that the attachment behavioral system, the neurological system that drives the desire to seek contact with someone who matters, is activated most powerfully not by presence, but by absence. The attachment system is a response to loss of proximity, not to proximity itself, which means a man who is always there, always available, always initiating, is never activating the system that drives her toward him. And a man whose presence becomes genuinely intermittent because his life is genuinely full is activating it continuously. Here is the complete picture of what changes the pattern. Contact that comes from genuine surplus rather than emotional deficit, because the pressure underneath it is felt even when the words are warm. Genuine threads and starting points that make her initiation feel naturally comfortable rather than exposed and vulnerable. And the authentic experience of his absence, not manufactured but real, that activates the attachment system that consistent, predictable presence can never reach. 3 things. None of them are about pursuing differently. all of them are about being differently. And the pattern they change does not change through more effort or more contact or more persistence. It changes through the specific quality of presence and the specific quality of absence that genuine confidence and a genuinely full life produce naturally. She will initiate when the evidence calculation tips, when the risk of not reaching out begins to feel larger than the risk of reaching out. And that tip happens not because anything dramatic occurred, because three small, consistent, genuine adjustments accumulated into a picture she could not ignore. Before this video ends, there is something that sits directly underneath everything we just covered and explains why it works at a level this video has not yet fully addressed. We talked about changing what your contact communicates, creating natural initiation opportunities, and letting genuine absence do what constant presence cannot. But the deepest reason any of this produces the response it produces is a specific feeling. One specific, neurologically documented, Harvard-researched feeling that, when a woman experiences it in the presence of a particular man, makes reaching out feel not just worth the risk, but genuinely impossible to avoid. Understanding what that feeling is and exactly how it is produced is the foundation that every other strategy either rests on or fails without. The video on your screen right now covers exactly that. It is called "Women Will Go Crazy About You When You Give Her This Feeling." It covers the Harvard dopamine research, Roy Baumeister's mattering psychology, and the 4 specific behaviors that create the feeling that makes a woman unable to stop thinking about someone, and eventually, inevitably, unable to stop reaching out first. This video told you what to do about the silence. That video tells you how to become the reason the silence ends. Watch it now.